Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today we're actually talking about China because China is harvesting tons of data from Western social media. We're talking the Facebooks and Twitters of the world used worldwide, except very heavily in China. This is what we're talking about. Now, this is coming from the Washington Post by author Kate Cadell, and I think she really nailed it. Now, here's what's going on. China is turning a major part of its internal internet data surveillance network outward and mining Western social media, again, Facebook, Twitter, etc., to equip its government agencies, its military, and its police with information on foreign targets, according to a Washington Post review of hundreds of Chinese bidding documents, contracts, and company filings. Now, China maintains a countrywide network of basically government data surveillance services called the Public Opinion Analysis Software that was basically developed over the past decade and is used domestically to essentially warn officials of politically sensitive information online. Essentially, what are people saying? We've already talked about the social scoring system and the social, basically the social acceptance scoring system as well in China in past videos and podcasts. Now, this software primarily targets China's domestic internet users and media, but a WaPost review of bidding documents and contracts for over 300 Chinese government projects since the beginning of 2020 include orders for software designed to collect data on foreign targets from sources such as Twitter, Facebook, and other Western social media platforms. The documents, publicly accessible through domestic government bidding platforms, also shows that agencies include state media, propaganda departments, police, military, and cyber regulators, and they're purchasing new or more sophisticated systems to continue to gather even more of this information. These include, for example, a $320,000 Chinese state media software program that mines Twitter and Facebook to create a database of foreign journalists and academics, a $216,000 Beijing police intelligence program that analyzes Western chatter on Hong Kong and Taiwan, and a cyber center in Xinjiang, home to the basically most of China's Uyghur population. I've done videos on them and how they're highly oppressed and forced labor, etc. And this basically is cataloging the mainly Muslim minority groups' language content abroad, meaning if you're a Uyghur outside or talking about this, they want to see it, they want to find it. Now, these surveillance dragnets are part of a wider drive by China to refine its foreign propaganda efforts through big data and artificial intelligence. We have actually seen, and I've talked about this here on this daily video/podcast and also on my radio show, some attempts of them to make things go viral with disinformation that simply fell flat. They are looking to improve that as well as other surveillance tactics as well. These also form a network of warning systems that are designed to basically sound real-time alarms for trends that undermine Beijing's interests, meaning if something like, Free Tibet or whatever starts to go viral, Beijing is going to understand that and have the ability to essentially pivot and react to this, as quickly as they can. Now, some of the Chinese government's budgeting also includes buying and maintaining foreign social media accounts on behalf of police and propaganda departments, yet others describe using the targeted analysis to refine Beijing's state media coverage abroad as well. The purchases range in size from small automated programs to projects costing hundreds of thousands of dollars that are staffed 24 hours a day by teams including English speakers and foreign policy specialists. The documents describe highly customizable programs that can collect real-time social media data from individual social media users. Some describe tracking broad trends on issues including U.S. elections. Obviously, every time a U.S. election rolls around, especially when the president is being elected or re-elected, that is obviously big news globally. Now, the Post was not able to review data collected by the systems, but did speak to 4 people based in Beijing, China, who are directly involved in government public opinion analysis and describe separate software systems that automatically collect and store Facebook and Twitter data in real time on domestic Chinese servers for analysis. Basically, they are taking all that information from those servers sitting here, let's say in North America, and they are making a copy of all of that into China. Basically, if your information is in there, you have no legal recourse under the law to tell the Chinese government or sue the Chinese government to actually delete your data from their servers. Now, Twitter and Facebook both ban automatic collection of data or automated collection of data on their platforms without prior authorization. Twitter's policy also expressly bars developers from gathering data used to infer a user's political affiliation or ethnic and racial origin. A lot of this actually stems from the Cambridge Analytica disaster, where they were gathering just an absolute ton of information via Facebook on a whole bunch of users that had no idea they were actually doing this. We are now starting to see in the last few years just how far the data mining rabbit hole goes, and it's not good. Now, China's systems for analyzing domestic public opinion online are a powerful but largely unseen pillar of President Xi Jinping's program to modernize Chinese propaganda, or rather the apparatus for Chinese propaganda, and maintain control over their internet, of which they do. You might have heard about the Great Firewall. I've talked about that extensively here as well. The vast data collection and monitoring efforts give officials insight into public opinion, which is basically a challenge, for China, because they really don't hold public elections or permit independent media. Essentially, there are no independent bloggers, if you will, in China. That is very, very heavily locked down, and they have been known to disappear. Celebrities are those that are public that in some way rub the Chinese government wrong. So there you go. Now, the services also provide increasingly technical surveillance for China's censorship apparatus as well. And most systems include alarm functions designed to alert officials and police to negative content in real time. Meaning, if I am in China, for example, and I start posting something that the Chinese government doesn't like, they're going to know about it. They're going to know about it quickly, which means somebody might be dispatched to have a conversation with me, or worse. Now, a Pew Research survey released in June showed internationally that perceptions of China among 17 advanced economies had basically dipped to near historic lows for a second year in a row in the aftermath of the US trade war, the Xi Jinping human rights crisis, think about the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, that entire mess, and the coronavirus pandemic, with which the Chinese government obviously seemed like they were not basically giving us the full story on that, and here we are. Now, in May of this year, President Xi called on senior officials to portray a, quote, more trustworthy, lovable, and reliable image of China abroad, calling for the, quote, effective development of international public opinion guidance, meaning we are going to basically try to force everybody into the opinion that China is great. And how can we do that online? Because we're an authoritarian internet, and we want authoritarian internet everywhere, and I'll get to that in a minute. Now, President Xi's comments reflect Beijing's growing anxieties over how to control China's image abroad. It's one thing domestically to essentially enforce, at the edge of a sword, that everybody's got to love you online as they are talking about you. It's another thing when you're sitting in a free and open society, relatively speaking, wherever you are, and you can pretty much say whatever you want without fear of recourse of the law or the government knocking down your door. Here in the United States, we can actually badmouth our government, and the government can't do anything about it outside of us leveling direct threats, like somebody saying that they want to commit a violent crime or harm somebody in the government. Obviously, there is no First Amendment protection for that. Now, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Government monitoring of social media isn't new. Back in 2017, I actually did a video/podcast on that as well. I was doing these back then as well. The Pentagon, basically, here in the United States Department of Defense, had their social media surveillance archive accidentally leak due to a vulnerability. So it's not right to say that China's the only one that is doing this. Governments worldwide simply surveil, simply want to get a pulse on the public, But here's the thing. China's aggressive global expansion, which is bringing authoritarian level surveillance and control of foreign internet connections that they are helping basically smaller companies to install, makes this much more alarming. They have seen, and the example I typically use, because they were one of the first, was Vietnam. Vietnam being another communist country or claimed communist country that is an ally of China. China essentially went in there and taught Vietnamese leadership on how to monitor, censor, and control the internet, and therefore control their population online. And so what we're talking about here is essentially China's ability to act on the data that they are collecting quickly and harshly if they need to. And that surpasses what the United States, or basically at this point, any country with data they've collected, internally there. So by all accounts, this appears to be a much more serious problem with China collecting all of these things. Nobody basically wants their data to leave. I don't want my data basically going to a country where I have no recourse under the law to say I have a right to be forgotten. We have good, staunch allies around the globe. Let's, for example, the European Union. That economic bloc, for example, has the GDPR, meaning if I'm using an app or an application or going to a website where I'm giving away or giving up information, and that country adheres to the GDPR, I have legal rights, and the United States recognizes that reciprocity. It's the same with Australia or Canada or South Africa or Japan or, a ton of other allies that we have as well, South Korea being another one. So this is what we're talking about here. It's never fun when a government, any government, and I just literally mentioned the United States here, collects data on its citizens. It's another thing when they have the ability not to have committees and can simply act on something. Meaning, if the United States or any country that purports to be a democracy, an anocracy, or something along those lines, oftentimes cannot move and execute quickly on data they're collecting because they have to jump through red tape. We have two political parties that will fight it out before anything is done. Just look at any recent budget fight here in the United States, or pretty much anything that the current president or previous president does that is completely opposed by the opposite side, not because they necessarily agree or disagree, but because that's essentially what they do now. China doesn't have that problem, which means if they want to move quickly or pivot into something, they can, because they're lockstep. They don't have elections. And when I was in China a few years back, that was made abundantly clear in conversations I had with clients that I had out there. They're like, yeah, well, we just know who we're going to vote for because the party picks it. And then we basically walk into the booth and vote for that person because the government knows if we vote for somebody else. So why would you vote for somebody else? This is what we're talking about. That gives China an advantage, unfortunately, in collecting this information and then acting upon it. And if they are turning over, let's say you might be a Chinese national or born in China, but a U.S. citizen now, and you are basically speaking to, let's say, relatives on Facebook here about, things that are going on back in your country of birth. If China gets wind of that, what does that say, or what happens to your family? What happens to, the relatives that you left behind or that are still in the home country? These are things that we really don't think about. These are things that while China's building an early warning system, they're trying to control thought. And that is a deep, deep concern. It's one thing to have actual influence. It's one thing to see advertisement or being bombarded by things that confirm your confirmation bias. It's another thing to basically be told or understand that if you don't say or act repetitively in one way, you potentially are causing harm to yourself or to others, or there are consequences that are potentially unforeseen. Therefore, you start to condition yourself to actually start talking about this. My first TED Talk on trust kind of alludes to this with effective and cognitive trust and how we are reinforcing these things. And from that perspective, it was cybersecurity. For here, it's just nationwide, and China would love to see it in the world. And so I think that's a real big concern. This video went on a little longer, but it's my very first video of 2022, and I think it's an interesting way to start this. And so make sure that you are, maintaining your privacy as best you can. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, where apparently China will data mine you. And please, obviously, feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. Pretty sure China's data mining that as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please stay private. Thanks, everyone.